All right, in today's lecture, we're going to be talking about pseudoscience, which is like science, but not good. Um, Unfortunately, in the past few years, pseudoscience has proliferated and become really, really sort of popular, seemingly amongst people who are on Facebook and stuff like that. I shouldn't say it quite like that. Facebook is really just kind of a means through which this sort of thing can spread, or not even Facebook, but social media in general. And it's kind of remarkable to me the amount of expertise that's just sort of waved off because people have read a blog. Whereas the really real reality of this is that people spend their entire careers studying a topic, and just because someone has sort of pieced together some different information that they've read about online and wove it into what seems to be a compelling story doesn't mean that it's true. Okay, just because something sounds good or seems reasonable or helps you to potentially understand the world does not make it a true statement. So I'm going to give you guys some signposts or hopefully some sort of markers that you can use to try to figure out, is something pseudoscience or is something good science? And the first pseudoscience example I'm using here is science-ish terms, or terms that seem like they should be scientific but really aren't scientific. And oftentimes when you're reading real science, just because you maybe aren't an expert in that area, things can sound like science-ish terms, and so this becomes a little bit complicated. But this is a good example here. This is a picture of a flux capacitor from the movie Back to the Future, and as cool of an idea as that sounds like, it's not a thing. Flux capacitors don't actually exist in real life, and so this is pseudoscience pretending to be science by using the science-ish terms. Another example that I found is this idea of these energy therapies. It says energy therapies consist of interventions that are designed to interact with the biofield. Sounds very scientific. They interact with the biofield of a person. And I've been doing biology for a long time now, and I have never heard of a biofield, not once. If you Google it, it doesn't appear to be a real term. So yeah, this is just a science-ish sounding term that people are using to appear more scientific. Key energy, or the biofield, is described as invisible psychophysical energy and energy, force, vitality, and strength. Again, I don't know what that is. I'm not sure what a biofield means. It's just a science-ish sounding term by some pretty interesting pseudoscience. The next is anecdotal evidence, which is super problematic and very easy to fall into. But the example, I'm a big baseball fan, and a few years ago, every single player was wearing these necklaces. And it's like, my batting average is perfect while wearing this particular necklace. And it's like, so what? You're one person, you've had 5 at bats. Sometimes guys get lucky. It's not necessarily because of the necklace. You say, oh, all my friends are hitting really well. It's like, okay, it doesn't matter. This is anecdotal. Unless you have controlled conditions, unless you have actual scientific variables that are set down, it becomes anecdotal evidence. You could think of it as hearsay, or basically it's like, if something happens for you, that's cool and that's great, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true in all cases, or even most cases. So yes, anecdotal evidence is an example that pseudoscience will often use in order to try to make itself seem more legitimate. I'm not saying anecdotal evidence is worthless. By the way, there's a few things that you probably believe that are true that you've just based on anecdotal evidence. My point is, it's not scientific. You shouldn't believe it with the same certainty that you believe scientific evidence. So the next signpost for pseudoscience is extraordinary claims without extraordinary evidence. So this is actually, people call this the Sagan rule, or the maybe heuristic or whatever. But anyway, Carl Sagan says, if you're going to make an extraordinary claim, you require extraordinary evidence to go along with that in order to prove that. So an example of this would be, because I was born on a particular date, I have particular characteristics. You can predict the way I'm going to behave in certain circumstances because I was born on January 31st. You know that because the day I was born, and it's like, well, that's a very, very bold, that's a very extraordinary claim to be made, but none of this is fleshed out by science. There are no studies that exist that show that your particular birthday causes you to have particular characteristics or causes you to act in a particular way. So extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If you see an extraordinary claim without extraordinary evidence, it's probably pseudoscientific, possibly just lying. That's sort of the next signpost of pseudoscience. By the way, pseudoscience doesn't need to have every single one of these. It can have just one and still be considered pseudoscientific. So, unfalsifiable hypotheses are another signpost for pseudoscience. For instance, the ghost did it. So we talked about a hypothesis as being a testable explanation for something in nature. It's a testable explanation for some observation. And if it's not falsifiable, if it's not testable, we're in the realm of pseudoscience. Okay, so an unfalsifiable hypothesis is the next thing to look out for if you're looking for pseudoscience. So if I'm sitting here saying something to you like, again, or here's a good one, I'm a ghost. Prove, and this is even harder on video actually, prove that I am not a ghost. So it's unfalsifiable. You can't do it. There's no claim that you could make that you can use to prove to me that I'm not a ghost. Okay, so I'm harping on this a little bit, but you need to have a hypothesis that you can actually physically test and is falsifiable. Your hypotheses need to be able to be proven wrong. Let's look at the next one. How do I prove or disprove? Yeah, I've been talking about that for 2 minutes anyway. The next problem is science that is done completely in a bubble with no outside peer review or no other scientists looking at it. Okay, so if you don't have the process of peer review, fairly often you're going to be dealing with pseudoscience. At least that's how it is in 2021. If you don't have other folks looking at stuff, it's probably pseudoscience. Okay. You need that process of peer review. So along with the process of other people checking your work, you need to check your own work as well. If you're just sort of cranking out science and never checking things, never repeating steps, not writing things down appropriately, it can be another problem. Then you don't delve directly into pseudoscience with this one, actually, but you delve into like bad science. But if you're never checking things, it's not good science. Okay, so science-ish sounding terms: flux capacitor, biofield. I don't know. You could make up your own hyperelectromagnetism. Science-ish sounding terms are like sort of the first thing you're looking for in pseudoscience. Anecdotal evidence. Your friend tells you it works. It might work. It might just work for your friend. Okay. So anecdotal evidence, Not necessarily that you should just reject all anecdotal evidence, but it's not science at the end of the day. Extraordinary claims without extraordinary evidence. I put a unicorn over here for that one. If you say something like, I saw a unicorn, okay, prove that you saw a unicorn. Or if I say something like, again, like, this necklace makes me better at baseball, okay, prove it. You need some really good evidence for that. Claims that are unfalsifiable. Many of the things I've just been discussing fall into that category, but like, I am a ghost. Can't prove that I'm not, so... Okay, or I could say taking vitamin C makes you live a lot longer. That's probably not a good example because that's actually testable. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. But you need to have a falsifiable hypothesis. Things that are not based on previous research, so you're starting from scratch. Things that are not based on peer review, so you're living in a bubble. No self-checking, no self-editing, no retraction, no ability to go back and fix things that perhaps you messed up. These are all ways that you can spot pseudoscience. So now that I've been blabbering on about pseudoscience for the last 10 minutes or whatever, I should clarify, why is science so good? Why is science so much better than pseudoscience? The reason for this is if you still are lucky enough to have living grandparents, it's probably a result of medical science. Okay? Pseudoscience is not keeping your grandparents around. It's not keeping the older people that you know and love here. If you use a cell phone, you should think science. Pseudoscience never did anything for communications technology. If you watch cable, this is a result of science. Okay? The way that we all live and relate to the world as a society is because of science. The reason that we are able to live past the average life expectancy of 35 years old is because of science. Science is important. Science is real. And really, there are a lot of certain kinds of pseudoscientific claims that we should really be shunning, that we should really be dismantling, because they're incredibly harmful to us. And that's especially clear right now with a lot of the anti-vax talk that you see involving the coronavirus. And it's just kind of wild because we've gotten rid of diseases. We've eliminated polio from the world. We've eliminated smallpox from the world. We have a vaccine for measles. We have a way of getting rid of all these horrendous diseases, but people don't really always want to believe them because they've bought into some pseudoscience. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. Science is real. Don't believe pseudoscience. That's all.